Oh man, I'm so tired. I just put up the curtain I washed and bed sheets I washed. Going to the back to the laundromat with my backpack, because I want to be part of the solution. Don't have to get my motorhome there. Yeah, I think I gotta change the batteries of my motorhome because it's given me a lot of issues that I can't confirm or anything else until I change the batteries. Um, I'm the teacher and student. I want to give myself a good grade. And as both, I kind of know I promise things and what I have to do. So I'm going to continue to Master of Science and Ecocentric Worldview readings because the last one is like in 2 days. The last of the course of 3 years to get this master's to develop an ecocentric worldview. I admit I haven't worked super hard after the first year and a half to get more students, which I just had a few guests, right, that obviously didn't want to invest that much, but I still appreciate them. And so I got to do what I say I got to do. It was obvious this course was going to fail. I talked about it because it's related to tipping points having already passed, what my theory predicts and explains. Still, I'm going to do this because, I'm judging myself in this course and I want to follow up with my commitments. So this is the part of the thesis draft. By the way, when I apply for like bigger portfolios for, let's say, school districts, I include K-12 curriculum sustainability related training. Like they might say, well, what is that? And by the way, I am a teacher in various forms, so it's hard to kind of put that in categories there. And I didn't include the last few times I put portfolios my definition of learning specialist because collective learning is something our species can no longer do, although it is at the origin of what created our species. I'll explain a little bit more in the next vlog I'm going to do on the human condition right after this one. Well, it's already recorded. I'm just going to load it. I have to. Okay, let's get back to this reading. Okay, so last time for this part, I had read the part that was just needing to insert the references. And a lot of time I didn't know what the references were. I just know I could find some. But these are my thoughts. Okay, so this is more like writing in the draft that I was going to include as I continued. So this is a quote by Rachel Carson. I think I might have read it last time. The human race, I don't like using those terms, is challenged more than ever before to demonstrate our mastery not over nature, but of ourselves. How could this be? Okay, so these are like things that I didn't put anywhere that I'm going to insert later. So how could this be? One possibility is how, and again, this is not a follow-up to the quote I just read. It's just little bits and pieces here and there I was going to include. How could this be? One possibility is how his peers, generations, so I'm talking about James Lovelock here, and how his theory on Gaia, as being, again, it's not a spiritual or theological theory. It's a theory about the Earth system science. He just named it that, and I say that it's probably the biggest blunder of his career. One possibility is how his peers' generations' worldviews were born of a mind that was deeply influenced by religious worldviews that started with the premise that man, I don't use that term either, I use homo communion kind, was the center of the universe. Okay, I was going to insert that somewhere as an explanation. With regards to flow of themes and how the knowledge is hopefully building on itself to understand a complex concept in ecological systems thinking that incorporates a framework that can be understood through the lens of the human condition. This will ensure consistency, again, these are different bits, and minimize conflicting ideologies contaminating the greater goal of creating responsible future citizens among the young learner generation. And you can't do that without an ecocentric worldview. And it was already like that before, but it's so obvious now that any type of worldview is toxic during the already begun Anthropocene. So these are bullet points that follow here. Scientists and decision makers need to stop assuming that newer proposed solutions, still in their early discussion stages, are bad simply by referring to ignorant core beliefs they personally possess that prompt them to assume these newer developing ideas are similar to ideological errors from the past. Example, draconian, Hitler. This type of intellectual laziness from the scientists slows down the onset of global scientific progress and of human evolution. And again, I use the terms that they want to hear. And can even be observed as being practiced by Nobel laureates. Critical thinking will never be efficiently practiced by any mature individuals who don't perform their own unique personal development work linked to their specific psychohistory. Not used as Isaac Asimov describes it, but as the science that exists in real life. Without doing this important work, they will forever be limited in their growing perception of reality due to their own stagnating worldviews. Ongoing life skills training. Life skills training helps us collaborate at human levels, and we've lost that, and we've lost it so quickly and so efficiently in the last few years since I took this training. It's amazing. Like, it's really one of the ways I can measure the acceleration of HSD among my species. But it's also that, life skills training involves noticing and admitting and discussing our triggers, and that will be needed by scientists or anybody else with stagnating worldviews, by the way. So that's why in the letter when I fired the, when I talked to the 4-page letter, I talked to the Ministry of BC of Advanced Education. I say, you got to include this, but what it really is, not like fake people trying to fake teach it. Always including, just because they have a BC teacher certification, they can pretend to teach things they don't know about. Always including metapsychology, accountability, and effective role modeling is the best way to become and remain a great scientist. Recently, and I don't know if my relatives kind of took it personally, and it's just the only French ones I had on my Facebook list, is I sent various definitions of the French word for accountability. And I also wrote in English as a comment to it, because nobody else did. His 3 components maybe is to define, let's say, a role somebody was going to take. And it could be a role of husband or, president or, police officer, doctor, whatever it is, teacher. What's the role? And what are the consequences for not acting? Really define this well. That's part of accountability. The other part is that the person in this role must be held to account. In an example of this is if they're asked questions, they must always answer questions. They can't play games around that, right? They must divulge why they made decisions and how they did their due diligence. And the other thing is just like teaching, a preschool kid, is if you say no, if you keep doing that, you're going to lose this privilege, is you follow through. So you follow through with what was defined as the punishments, right, in number 1, and you follow through with it. And of course, hopefully they're fair. It's not hanging somebody, but you don't need to hang people if you follow through with things like losing your job and you can't work in a similar role for 5 years, for example, in this society. Okay, that'd be like a good punishment, but it doesn't, it just, you get a chance. Maybe there's even warnings. But you got to be able to answer questions why you made the choices. That's the concept of civilization with accountability as one of its pillars. And so the third one would be, again, the punishments must be followed through. And people don't argue about it, because if they like this person, let's say as a politician before, that means they would have had access to what the definition is and the investigation, why they didn't answer and how they made their choice. And if it was a bad one on purpose, because they didn't serve, let's say, the greater good of their, public, if they're a leader, then yeah, anybody that argues with this, you can pretty much punish them too, because these people are like, that's not okay. You want to favor this guy because you want to be him, let's say a Trump or something, and Trump says 10% of things that would be helpful, but the 90% of what he says is kind of toxic. So I know it'd be nice if the 10% of what he says would be a great change. It would lead to accountability, for example, and transparency, and discover a lot of the bad guys that we think are the good guys in politics are really the bad guys, and he's willing to take risk or talk about it. But the 90% of what he said is based on all of his nonsense and pathologies and mental illness and self-serving behaviors, and promoting so-and-so that he claims will now be in these new roles, except they're not that competent. He just wants to sell you that image. So in a way, it's not enough, right? There's no good candidates in politics anymore, and that's every kind of political system you're talking about. That wasn't in here. I'm just going to continue now. So again, ongoing life skills training, always including metapsychology, accountability, and effective role modeling, is the best way to become and remain a great scientist. And that means role modeling, by the way, is transparent. It's not just whoever you're role modeling to, it should be everybody. Okay, so next page, I'm at 11 of 13. Again, this is a new section of just something I was going to include later. Steps that will be undertaken during the research will be to ascertain how our definition of ecocentrism was adopted and to conclude on which themes must be included in the teachings in order for a student graduating high school to have completely grasped the concept as a whole. And by the way, succeeding at this is also teaching as much the staff that already are there, that have seniority, that don't know how to do this, that don't know how to think properly to do this. So it's not just, having experts in curriculum who are not ecocentric in their worldview write this, and then suddenly somebody tries to teach it over time and it doesn't work out, and it goes back to the norm. Just like when I was teaching life skills as part of one of my master's degree courses, and we invited not just a teacher of the field placement that I included this in, who never came, except because she was too worried about her age and her biological clock to come be a good role model for kids, is also the parents didn't come ever. They just thought it was a babysitting service I was offering as part of my master's degree. I don't know. If so, I have a master's degree in babysitting, which is, should be superior to ECE, right? Anyways, so of course the skill sets they learned they were happy with was lost, and they have become the same toxic, adults that their parents were. So it's pretty sad. So again, to teach this is to admit we are going to screw up at it for about 3 generations, but we must stick to this because it's not hard to define ecocentrism. And once we define that, part of the accountability definition is prove that it is. And we'll become systems thinkers at the same time, right? Furthermore, this is a new category. Furthermore, there will also be mention of other jurisdictions who have successfully integrated the concept of ecocentrism within the K-12 years of schooling, and perhaps include their successes within the scope of the final recommendations. I say this because I think I'd found a school in Brazil, a paper on that, except I hadn't investigated enough on whether it was BS or not. So it might have been nobody succeeded. There was nobody to reference as being successful at this in my recommendations. Indeed, the concept of sustainability existed before the onset of man, but man is the species who made it necessary to start adopting more sustainable practices. So that's a difference between the concept of sustainability and success and sustainable practices, behaviors, and methods and whatever. And that's a big part of the logic when I fired my master's degree faculty in the letter I wrote to you, but I haven't finished reading the appendix for that yet. Appendices? It is hoped that the research paper will be noticed by the BC Ministry of Education, who can barely notice, where their parking spots are, and that the researcher would be consulted and employed in order to help create a more detailed, future-focused provincial curriculum. Should BC's curriculum be adapted to today's more holistic view of ecocentrism? Perhaps it would be at the forefront of teaching future generations about what ecocentrism, at the psychological level, truly means to society's quest for a better world. Quality, not quantity. Greater, not bigger. Right as abstract, open RefWorks windows. There is a lot of data that exists to define sustainability, but very little that links it in ways that correlate to the laws of eumenics. Eumenics I define it here in a short little sentence. The psychology that finds themes, patterns, and tendencies in human thinking and behaviors. Which could be a way that, we could say Isaac Asimov used it in his Foundation series. And that's the way I define it, kind of thing. The psychology behind the understanding of sustainability may very well be, in big part, what caused people to differ so strongly in how the term is used and how disagreements arise due to worldviews and inherent values. And this statement, by the way, is one of the types of logic I use to predict my faculty would not answer or not know how to answer the letter where I fired them. It's because their worldviews does not allow them to understand sustainability, especially, and to actually question their own thinking about it, because they already have a gigantic office as specialists in sustainability. We find in other secondary schools of Canada and around the world very different content in the teachings about science and social sciences. I think that teacher I'm talking about, the one that was the most elitist, pretty with glasses at an older age. And I don't know how far she went with her looks instead of her critical thinking skills, but she I think, got out of that program and just did kind of fake research for the university. And I say fake research because I called her on it and asked for it. And all she does is collect data and not include it in her reports. That's pretty much what she does, I would say. And sometimes she doesn't even collect the data herself. She has other people do it. And then she doesn't know what to do with it. She just writes a beautiful presentation. She's beautiful and she smiles, and even with her braces, she was beautiful. But anyways, I don't know if that's the scientist that you want, but I tell you, the world's going to get worse and not better if that's who you want. If a scientist, like, she was upset one time that I CC'd her when I criticized a public servant for a human right violation and big issues in privacy. She didn't want to be included as a CC, and I was just saying, hey, I'm not an idiot here, like I'm in a master's program. But she would make me out to be an idiot because she doesn't want to do any culture repair, right? That's sad. I don't think she had kids, so that's a good thing. Is the cause of this the cultural memes in effect at the time the curriculum is updated, or more alarmingly, based on the political and or economic shifts of power of those who work at or consult for the ministries of education and school boards? Did I read the first part? We find in our other secondary schools of Canada and around the world very different content in the teachings about science and social sciences. And again, I'm talking about this. Well, you can see what's happening in Florida right now. Anyway, that's a paragraph about that. What would be a key list of themes necessary to define and teach ecocentrism? This is a question I'd be asking and answering in this document. Child and adolescent development psychology would have to be part of what determines these guidelines. In grades 11 and 12, what should be the key themes? Should they be limited to earth science and social science class? Could the importance of the teachings even come to light without the foundational groundwork being laid at an earlier age? What are the ideal ages of when to teach various key themes of ecocentrism that would have been defined in this paper? Now, I sent this to my thesis supervisor, the first and the second, and I could find the emails of their responses after they may or may not have read it fully and understood it. And, that could be part of the next reading and how ridiculous it is. So again, I didn't just fire them because I didn't feel support. It's because they just didn't want to, they just kept dragging me on, and I'm paying semester after semester, and they just didn't know what to do with sustainability as experts. I hope with this research to find if and how BC's curriculum could be succeeding and also falling short of its goals to create environmentally responsible citizens. Of course, I already knew it was falling short. A preliminary scan of the BC curriculum thus far seems to suggest that we are not forming thinkers per se as much as future workers. And those who are not future workers are being, I'm not saying this in there, but those that won't be future workers, we are finding another industry for them is drug addict, mentally ill people, so that, they can move the economy in that way. You can see these patterns developing now. And those that don't want to do that, bring more immigrants in. And I'm not against immigration. I'm just pro-structured, strategic immigration, which is win-win scenarios for all. There's no discrimination in it. You just got to admit that, the way all countries do it right now is a slavery system, really, within what we consider an economy of endless growth that is projected to continue in the future. That was pretty much how curriculums are adapted by the elites, right? Okay, this is the last page. Some key questions this research will try to answer may be: does BC's K-12 curriculum educate youth in what may be their generation's most significant conceptual learning tools at a psychological level? How do we define, that's number two. Number two, how do we define the difference between the use of the words sustainable and sustainability? The third consideration will consist of a review of curriculum materials with a view to ensuring that educators are provided with sufficient clarity of knowledge, that they may be well prepared to effectively invoke the principles of ecocentrism and to minimize the likelihood of thematic misinterpretation. Here's a quote from Silent Spring. No, I think it's just a reference from a quote. I'm not sure if it's included on this page. Would it be accurate to state that a species? This is a question for me. It's one of my. It's the last paragraph of my draft for the introduction of my thesis that I didn't do because they didn't even try to find a supervisor when they didn't want to do it in the program, and they could have maybe found one in the Master of Leadership in Education program at that same university. Would it be accurate to state that a species is insane and doomed to fail if its technological trajectory is one which leads to a continuous cycle of terraforming the inherent sustainable natural processes out of their own planetary system, therefore terraforming, and thus result in planet destabilization? Yes, so we're doing that, so we are insane and we are doomed. Okay, I'll stop the video right now, and I'll read some more next time.